Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. We are nearing the end of Surah Baqarah. We have studied until verses 274. Today we'll start off with verse 275 and hope we can end the surah today and also then start off with the literal and idiomatic translation, and let's see how far we can go with that today. So, beginning with the verse 275, I'm going to read the text in translation and try to explain some points. الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا فمن جاءه موعظة من ربه فانتهى فله ما سلف فأمره إلى الله وَمَنْ عَادَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. On the other hand, those who devour interest when they rise up on the day of judgment will rise up exactly like the man whom Satan has driven to madness by his touch. This is because they have said, trading too is after all interest, or after all like interest, and how strange it is that God has permitted trading and forbidden interest. No doubt God has prohibited it. Consequently, he who received this warning from his Lord and desisted, then whatever he has taken in the past belongs to him. No action shall be taken against him, and his fate is in the hands of God. And those who again commit the offense even after this warning are the companions of the fire. They shall stay, or they shall abide therein forever. So, as you can see, viewers, from the very first words of the translation, they begin with this clause, on the other hand, which means that there is something which is discussed right before it, which is opposite to it. And I did point this out in our last session, that often in the Quran, two opposite things are placed side by side so that the difference between the two comes out very clearly. So often we find that in the Quran, whenever the day of judgment is discussed and the description of the people of paradise is depicted, you will find that immediately after it or before it, the depiction of the people of hell or people who will end up in hell is also depicted side by side. So this comparison actually brings out the difference on the one hand, and on the other hand, it also tells us how starkly the two would be placed. In a very similar manner here, we find that in the previous verses which we discussed in our last session, the topic of infaq or charity was under discussion. How people were urged to do certain things and refrain from certain things. So in the previous verses, it was said that charity is something that must not be given in a way that you keep reminding people of your generosity. It was also said that you must not show off your charity. It was also said that people who are specially deserving of your charity are the ones who have a lot of self-esteem, who would not come to you for their needs. In fact, you are to reach out for them. So this was a discussion that we see was done in our previous verses, and at the same time we also saw certain parables which the Quran gave regarding people who spend for the cause of God and others who do not. So now, right opposite to this is another mental state which is depicted. So the person who is spending in the way of God, the person who is charitable, is a person who is always focusing on the hereafter. He or she is someone who would always try to give preference to the gains of the hereafter. So this is a certain mindset which the Quran has depicted. Contrary to this mindset, viewers, we find another mindset, and that is people who devour interest. Because such people who devour interest do something which is absolutely unethical, and they just do not devour interest, they actually justify it and question God, and they say that, well, God has allowed trading, so if trading is allowed, why not interest is also allowed? After all, the two are very similar. The Quran has not even commented on this and said that how foolish a thing this remark would be. I mean, the Quran did not even consider it worthy to be commented upon. It never even negated them. It just cited what they said, and of course left the utter foolishness of this view to the believers. That how can trading and interest be alike? In trading, you spew your capital in the market, of course, and you trade things. On the other hand, interest is something in which a person who becomes totally selfish for his own needs, he gives loans, people borrow from him or her, and he would demand something over and above that. So an important thing that needs to be understood here, that in religion or in Islam, lending is basically not a means that is even qualified as something through which a person should earn anything. Lending is something which the Almighty wants us to do to help out people. So in the first place, it says, now the Quran actually says that whatever you can spare belongs to the society. You should not even lend it, you should give it away. But a lesser step than giving it away is to lend, so that you can, lend the money and the borrower will return the money. But the third step which people take is that you not only lend, but you also require the person to pay you over and above. The Quran calls this to be an unethical or an unethical arrangement, and it does not allow interest to be taken, because the person who gives on interest, he is not concerned in any way with how the other person who has borrowed the money would return it in any way. So that is why the Quran has not even cared to comment on this sick mentality. All that it has said is that people who will devour interest, when they will rise up on the day of judgment, they will rise up as if a person has become mad, and like the touch of Satan has made someone mad. So this is just a depiction of how people, when they rise up on the day of judgment, they'll be as if they have gone totally mad, they've become lunatics. And it's just like a portrayal which the Quran has given here, that as soon as they rise on the day of judgment, because they were guilty of consuming interest and devouring interest, so the way they will be treated and the way they will be depicted is something which is absolutely pathetic. And then the Quran says that it is such such an obvious thing that the Quran has prohibited riba and allowed trading. So it says, وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. And therefore, people to whom this advice comes and they desist, then the Quran says that whatever they have taken in the past, that shall be not accounted for, they shall not be held accountable for that. And وَأَمْرُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ, its matter will be consigned to God. However, people who persist in this, then the Quran says that they will abide by in the fire of hell, and they'll stay in it forever. So this is a very grave punishment which the Quran has described here, that people who consume interest or who devour interest, for them, if they don't desist, then the punishment in the hereafter is absolutely horrific, and that is that they will abide in hell forever. We just cannot even imagine how abiding in a burning, in a sizzling fire is just even beyond our perception, beyond our imagination. But then this is how the Quran has said. And at other instances, it has said that when our skin would burn, people who end up in hell, when their skin will burn because they would be abiding in hell forever, they will be given a new skin. Baddalnahu juludan ghayraha, which means that their skin would be replaced by some other skin, and then that will also burn, and this replacement will be a continuous effort, so that the pain that they receive is something which goes on forever. So one even shudders and one gets goosebumps when we even imagine. We just cannot even touch fire to the slightest, and how can we even think of being burning there, and that too forever and forever. So this is the punishment for people who persist after being given this warning that they will still consume interest. And then it says, يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَا وَيُرْبِي الصَّدَقَاتِ وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ كَفَّارٍ أَثِيمٍ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. On that day, God will blot interest and increase charity. And in reality, God does not like any ungrateful, any usurper of rights. Indeed, those who professed faith and did good deeds, adhere to the prayer and paid zakat, have their reward with their Lord, and there they shall have nothing to fear or to be sorrowful about. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا إن كنتم مؤمنين فإن لم تفعلوا فأذنوا بحرب من الله ورسوله وإن تبتم فلكم رؤوس أموالكم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون وإن كان ذو عسرة فنظرة إلى ميسرة وأن تصدقوا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون واتقوا يوما ترجعون فيه إلى الله ثم توفى كل نفس ما كسبت وهم لا يظلمون. Believers, if you truly fear God and give up what remains of interest, so give up what remains of interest, but if you do not, if you do it not, beware of war from God and his messenger. And if you repent, then you can have your principal amount. Neither shall you be allowed to deal unjustly, nor shall you be dealt with unjustly. And if the borrower is in difficulty, grant him respite until it is easy for him to repay. And if you write off the debt, it is better for you if you know. And fear the day when you shall be returned to God, then every soul shall be paid back there for what it did, and no injustice shall be done to people. So, continuing with this topic of interest, the next thing which is stated in the succeeding verses is that, remember, on the day of judgment, God is going to give manyfold to people who did charity, and those who were guilty of consuming or riba and therefore usurping the money of other people. God is going to blot that interest, which means that it's not going to bear them with any reward at all. And God does not like people who are ungrateful, kulla kaffarin athim, and who are usurper of rights. So this actually, in a few words, is a comment from God that people who consume interest, who usurp the rights of other people, the Quran says that they are kafar and they are athim. So kafar means that they are ungrateful. They are people who have no remorse in any way. They, instead of showing remorse for this and being grateful to God for his favors, for the gifts, and for whatever he has done for us, instead of, as a result, sharing the privileges that they have, they start ending up and they become snakes who are trying to leverage the money of other people towards themselves, and they usurp the rights of other people. So a person who takes interest, who charges interest, is a person who is ungrateful to God, who is one who usurps the rights of people. This stress, viewers, on the consumption of interest, on the devouring of interest, is something, the stress of which must be understood, because, as I said, the Quran regards this to be an absolutely unethical contract. It does not allow and does not regard it to be fair that you are giving a person some loan to help him out. And in the first place, that should not have been a loan. It should have been just a grant, just an act of charity. But one step less is that you give a loan. So that is already a compromise situation. But when you add another thing to it and you say that, well, I'm going to earn from that, from lending to people, then this is absolutely something which is unethical and it is immoral, and it has no basis as far as the Quran is concerned. And it is not just the Quran. We know that in ancient scriptures and previous scriptures, interest has been dealt with in the same way. And people who charge interest, who consume interest, who do this in any way, they are they're taken to task by the previous scriptures as well. And the Quran has just continued with that, and it has said that this is how these people will fare before the Almighty. And again, it has stressed that people who have professed faith and they have adhered to the prayer and they have paid zakat, then they should remember that for them there is unending reward with their Lord, and they have nothing to fear. So what exactly are they thinking when they're lending people money on interest? They should not even think about, because as far as they are concerned, if they do help out people by lending them, and they have this eternal reward absolutely safe for them in the hereafter. And then another thing which the Quran says is that as far as believers are concerned, who truly believe in God, then they should give up whatever remains of interest. So this is the time when the Quran, this verse was being revealed. It was urging people who had lent amounts to various people who would require them, who were in need of them. They were told that, well, you just give up the amount which is over and above the lent amount, and you can have the principal back, but just give up the interest part. And if you do not do so, then the state will fight against you. So people have generally not understood this verse in the sense that it is actually found here. They think that consuming interest is tantamount to war with God and His Prophet. Yes, of course, it is tantamount, but this is actual war which the Quran is speaking. It is giving an ultimatum from an Islamic state that you should desist from this, but if you do not desist from it, then the Prophet of God is going to wage war against you, because you are not listening to what the Almighty is telling you, that you can take your principal amount, but the interest which is over and above that principal amount, you cannot charge that and you must give it up. And it says, وَإِن تُبْتُمْ فَلَكُمْ رُؤُوسُ أَمْوَالِكُمْ. The principal amount is yours as long as you repent. from the over and above interest. So la tazlimuna wa la tazlamun, neither should you be dealt unjustly, or nor shall others be. So neither should you should be allowed to be dealt in unjustly, which means that the principal amount, if it is given back to you, that is absolutely your right, because if that is not given back to you, then you will be suffering. And on the other hand, if you allow that interest to be charged, then the other person to whom you had lent the amount would be suffering. So la tazlimuna wa la tazlamun. So neither shall you be allowed to deal unjustly, you should not be charging interest, and nor shall you be dealt with unjustly. So when you are dealt unjustly, it means that even your principal amount should be forsaken, and that should not be the case. And then the Quran urges the lenders of loan. It says that, well, if you have lent lent a certain amount to people, and they are not in a position to give it back, then it says give them more time. So on compassionate grounds, it says give them more time. وَإِنْ كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ فَنَظِرَةٌ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ. So if a person is in difficulty, he would be able to come out of that difficulty if you give him some more time, some more grace period. And the Quran says that, well, if you are able to be so magnanimous that you can even forego the whole amount, that would be the best thing. Tasaddaqu khairul lakum. If you just forego the amount, you write off that debt, it would be something which would be hugely in your favor. If you just know that this is something that you will do and earn the pleasure of God, you will earn a lot of reward from Him. So wattaqu yawman turja'una fihi ila Allah. So this part of interest, as it is coming to an end, this section, it gives this very important statement the Quran makes, that you fear the day when you shall be returned to God, and every soul shall be paid back there for what it did, and no injustice shall be done to people. Again, it's like a warning and a glad tiding at the same time, that you should fear the day when every person will be given what it was supposed to have earned. And therefore, you must realize that on that day, people will not be dealt with in any unjust manner. Yes, you can deal people in this world in an unjust way, but that is not going to happen in the hereafter, when everything will be in its place, perfect justice will be meted out. So now we come, the surah shifts slightly in response because of the fact that we know that the coherence in the Quran, the way we have seen it, that how things arise from one to another. And this is the part in Surah Baqarah in which directives have been given. We have started off with various directives. We have studied the directive of Qisas, we have studied inheritance, we have studied the Hajj, and we have studied how various other important things, they proceed from one to another. And this, as the surah is drawing to a close, now since the matter of interest had already been discussed, so it paved the way of another important discussion, and that is that whenever you are going to lend an amount, it should not just be based on any understanding. It must be put to writing. It must be written down. But before we start off with these verses, because there are some details regarding them, if you have any questions regarding the part that we have just finished, which of course deals with interest, please raise them.
Dear participants, please raise your hands if you have any questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem, for a wonderful explanation. If anybody has any questions, this is the time to ask your questions. Dr. Saleem, I don't see any raised hands, but I have a question. So the credit cards that we have, they have very high interest rate, very high at times, in the late 20s, sometimes early 30s. So what is that? Is that interest? And because we indulge in it, do we also
Right.
kind of...
So you see, that's an important question that you have raised. And the answer to this question is that if you study the Quran, the whole corpus of the Quran, you'll find that the issue of interest is dealt with at 4 or 5 instances. And on no such instance has it regarded the payment of interest to be forbidden at all. So it is basically the consumption of interest, or the charging of interest, or the devouring of interest, which is always under discussion in the Quran. Not at a single place has the Quran said that paying interest is something which is proscribed or prohibited. In fact, a person who's paying interest, he is ultimately ending up to be on the wrong side, which means that he or she is suffering, because you see, you're paying an extra amount, and instead of oppressing others, you end up oppressed yourself. So that is why the Quran, in its whole corpus, is not discussed on ever proscribed the paying of interest. So in the case of credit cards, if the time stipulated, you cross that time, then of course you will have to pay a certain amount of interest. Of course, a believer or person would always try that he or she remains within the stipulated time period. Normally, we try to do so, but for any reason, if that is not possible and you cross that time and you have to pay interest, whatever the rate is, then I mean that is a penalty that you are paying, and that interest amount that you are actually paying, as I said in the first place, is not even proscribed in any way. It is just the charging of interest. I mean, the bank was charging that interest, that that entity is doing something prohibited. But as a borrower, when you are crossing that time period and paying some extra amount as penalty, then that is something, of course, which is not even, I mean, it's not prohibited at all.
Gee, and then the thing is, the amount of interest that the society pays, it almost is like that word talk that you use. That's what seems to be, holding everybody's by the neck. It seems the amount of interest that people pay here on their cards keeps accumulating. Thank you so much for
Yes.
that, Noshaba Wasim. You have a question? Please go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, my question is regarding interest. When you put a money in a bank, normally they give you interest, and interest rate is
Right.
changed. It's sometime up, sometime down. So can our money in the bank and get that interest, because it's not fixed. It's a so variable interest kind
I
of.
mean, even if it is variable, basically what you're doing is you are charging interest on a amount which is lent to the bank. So I mean, that is something that you should avoid at all cost, unless of course the reason that you consume that amount is to adjust inflation. So a case that can be made in favor of using that interest money which is added to your account could be that you would like to preserve the value of your money, and that is done by making it adjusted against any inflationary agreements. I mean, you know that the money that you keep in bank, at times it gets devalued over a period of time. So if you're charging a certain amount of interest and you're using only that amount of interest money, which is equivalent to the inflation of that month or the whatever the time period, then a case can be made in favor of that. And if people think that this is one way of preserving the value of the money that they had actually lent to the bank, then I don't think that this can be objected to.
Yes, sir. My question is, sir, normally, if it's the organization, is it okay to get the interest, or like it's more forbidden in daily basis, like one person to another person, or it's the same?
It's the case for both. I mean, the issue of interest is not just for personal consumption, whether it's for business consumption, for whether it's trading, whether it's an organization, whether it's an individual, whatever be the form. You see, basically, interest is regarded to be a proscribed form of financial transaction, because you are charging something on a loan that was given to someone. So the only fair way was that you get that loan returned to you. A person borrowed money from you, and you just take back that borrowed money. So you have no right to demand any extra amount, because the reason that the Quran regards it to be an unfair deal is that borrowed amount will be expended by the person who has borrowed it. So now that he has to return, he is not only to recreate that borrowed amount, he has to recreate an additional amount as well, over and above that borrowed amount, which is of course interest. So that makes it to be an unfair deal.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. There are no more questions at this time.
Okay, so as I was saying earlier on, that we now move to another section of this surah, which is now drawing to a close, that now it is being said that once the issue of interest has arisen, and therefore, of course, certain directives were given, we've just gone through those directives. It is now said that because the issue of interest has now been raised and the matters of lending and borrowing are now in discussion, so a very appropriate thing here is that whenever you are borrowing or lending an amount for a certain period of time, as the Quran would specify later on, ila ajalin musamma, then it should not be left to any oral understanding, because such understandings can always lead to disputes, and especially if people who are involved in them, they pass away and the matter is it now rests on their heirs, and they might have a different perception. So this could cause a lot of problem, and we know that in the absence of any such written agreement, there's been so many instances in which it has caused a lot of dispute, difference, and even ended up in a lot of bad taste, and bad blood has been drawn. But the thing here that the Quran discusses here and gives it very importance is that whenever you are borrowing or lending for a period of time, then you must write it down. And not only should you write it down, you should also have it testified in the presence of witnesses, so that it's not just an understanding between two parties or two people. There is a neutral party also present in the form of witnesses, which can later on, if called to give a testimony, is able to give the verdict that yes, this steal did take place, this borrowing and lending did take place. So you see, one of these things that we have to understand is that the Quran gives us a lot of directives in our social dealings, in our communal conduct, in which, if they are followed, we are able to secure ourselves from a lot of commotion and a lot of disputes. So this is one category of those directives. And I'm just now going to read out the text in translation. It says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu iza tadayantum bidaynin ila ajalin musamma faktubuh wal yaktub baynakum katibun bil adl ولا يأبى كاتب أن يكتب كما علمه الله فليكتب وليملل الذي عليه الحق وليتق الله ربه ولا يبخس منه شيئا فإن كان الذي عليه الحق سفيها أو ضعيفا أو لا يستطيع أن يمل هو فليملل وليه بالعدل. So let me first read out the translation of this part. It says, believers, matters of lending and borrowing will however continue. So when you acquire a loan for a fixed period, record it in writing. When you acquire a loan for a fixed period, record it in writing. And let a scribe write it down between you with fairness. And he who is able to write should not refuse to write. In fact, just as God has taught him to write, he also should write for others. So remember, in the times of the Prophet, the people who were equipped or conversant with the art of writing were not many. So it is said that when the person who is borrowing, on him is the responsibility to have the whole document written, then a person who is able to write that document, whenever he is called upon to do so, he should not desist, because this is something which is a trust which has been given to him, and God would like that to be discharged in a very sincere way. And therefore it says that just as God has taught him to write, he should write it down for others. And the one who has acquired the loan should have the document written down. And he should fear God his Lord, and should not make any reduction in it. Of course, the person who is responsible of borrowing the money, the Quran says it is his responsibility to write the document, the loan document. So it's not the lender, it is the borrower on whom rests this documentation. And this documentation is something about which it is said that he should not in any way reduce whatever has been written down. La yabkhas minhu shay'a, which means that if he does any hanky-panky, then he should remember that he should fear God. In fact, it says, well, yattaqillaha rabbahu, he should fear God his Lord, and should not make any reduction in it. Then if he on whom rests the responsibility of writing is indiscreet or feeble or unable to have it written, let his guardian have it written down with justice. So basically, the person who has borrowed money, he is the person who is going to write that document. But if he himself is indiscreet, I mean, he is someone who is not yet of age, maybe, or he's not in the proper frame of mind to write, as people who might be young, or maybe people who are not in their full senses, that they are called safih by the Quran. So the Quran says for such people, their responsibility, of course, would shift from them, and their guardians should write. And other categories are who are zarif, who are feeble, like old men and women. And similarly, aw la yastati, or for any other reason who don't have the capacity to write, then the Quran says that the guardian of that person who is borrowing the money, let him have it written with justice. فَلْيُمْلِلِ الْوَلِيُّ بِالْعَدْلِ. And then it is said, وَاسْتَشْهِدُوا شَهِيدَيْنِ مِنْ رِجَالِكُمْ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَكُونَا رَجُلَيْنِ فَرَجُلٌ وَامْرَأَتَانِ مِمَّنْ تَرْضَوْنَ مِنَ الشُّهَدَاءِ أَنْ تَضِلَّ إِحْدَاهُمَا فَتُذَكِّرَ إِحْدَاهُمَا الْأُخْرَى ولا يأبى الشهداء إذا ما دعوا ولا تسأموا أن تكتبوه صغيرا أو كبيرا إلى أجله ذلكم أقسط عند الله وأقوم للشهادة. So let me first translate this part that we have just read. So we finished that until reading this part. It said, let his guardian have it written down with justice. Now it says that after writing down the document of loan, the next step is that witnesses should be called who would testify to this loan document. So it says, and call in 2 male witnesses from among your men. But if 2 men cannot be found, then 1 man and 2 women from among your likable witnesses. 2 women, because if one of them gets confused, the other one reminds her. And these witnesses must not refuse when they are summoned. And whether the matter is big or small, be not negligent in documenting the deal up to its period. This is more just in the sight of God. So it says, ذَلِكُمْ أَقْسَطُ إِنَّ اللَّهِ وَأَقْوَمُ لِلشَّهَادَةِ وَأَدْنَى أَلَّا تَرْتَابُوا إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ تِجَارَةً حَاضِرَةً تُدِيرُونَهَا بَيْنَكُمْ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَلَّا تَكْتُبُوهَا وَأَشْهِدُوا إِذَا تَبَايَعْتُمْ وَلَا يُضَارَّ كَاتِبٌ وَلَا شَهِيدٌ وَإِن تَفْعَلُوا فَإِنَّهُ فُسُوقٌ بِكُمْ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. So it says that this is more accurate. I mean, the previous verse was that this is more just in the sight of God. It ensures accuracy in testifying, and through it, the chances of you being inflicted with doubts are reduced. Indeed, if the transaction be face to face and an everyday one, there is no offense on you if you do not write it down, and call in witnesses also if you sell or purchase anything. And beware that no harm should be done to the scribe or the witness. And if you do so, then this will be a transgression which will cling to you. And keep fearing God, and do understand that God is teaching you, and God has knowledge of all things. So a couple of things that have been added. We already have discussed the fact that first, the person who is going to borrow the money, on him or her is the responsibility of writing down the loan, and it should not just be written down. The next step is that this written documentation should be actually, it should be vouched by people, and the Quran says that 2 male witnesses should be called to testify on this loan document. And if 2 male witnesses are not found, then it says that 1 male, and in place of the other male, you can have 2 women, so that if one of them gets confused, the other one can remind her. And this is, Quran says, this ensures accuracy in testifying. It is more just in the eyes of the Lord, and of course, as it is said, that it also reduces the chances of you being inflicted with doubts. So one of the things, dear viewers, that is, of course, can raise the question in the minds of those who read this verse is that, is the witness of a woman half that of a man? Because basically it is this verse of the Quran which is used to adduce the fact that women have half the witness of the Quran, because as you can see, the Quran has said here that if 2 men cannot be found, then in place of 2 men, 1 man and 2 women from among those people who are your likable ones, whom you can trust, they should be called upon to bear witness. Now, a couple of things that you need to understand, that we all, in fact, need to understand, that it is from this verse that our jurists have drawn this conclusion that in the case of documentary evidence, they say, of course, the Quran has already specified this, but they go a step ahead and they say that even the case of circumstantial evidence, this same procedure should be adopted. And what is that? Circumstantial evidence means that whenever there is a crime committed, wherever there is a crime committed, in that case too, a crime will be proven. For example, if a theft has taken place, for example, if some woman has been raped, some robbery has taken place, or any other offense has been committed by people, the Quran says that, our jurists in fact say that they must be testified, and the testification of a circumstantial evidence is exactly the same as documentary evidence, in which 2 men, or in the absence of 2 men, 1 man and 2 women should be called upon to testify. Now, the basic assumption here is that the 2 situations are actually the same, which is, of course, a very incorrect inference. We know that in the case of documentary evidence, it is we who have the discretion to choose our witnesses. I can call in any person that I like as witness, but in the case of a circumstantial issue in which there is a crime being committed, I don't have the choice to choose witnesses. Whoever are present there, they will assume the status of witness. So what our jurists have done is that they think that circumstantial evidence is similar to documentary evidence, and they have not realized that they are poles apart. Because in the case of documentary evidence, we can choose the witnesses. They are at our disposal. I can call anyone that I would like. But in the case of circumstantial evidence, which is of course in the case of a crime, I don't have this choice. I cannot pick my witness. Whoever is going to be there is its witness. So the cardinal mistake that they have done is that they have drawn a false analogy. And therefore they say that in the case of circumstantial evidence, in the case of crimes, they shall also be established on the basis of two men, or in the absence of one man, or and two women. However, there are jurists who do not accept the testimony of a woman in the case of punishments at all. Many of our jurists, it is only Ibn Hazm who says that because of the words that the wording of this Quranic verse is such that in the case of circumstantial evidence, if it's a crime committed, then two women will be substantially equal to a man. And hence he is one person who equates this to be a fact that a woman has a half witness, whereas all the other jurists, they don't even give this status, and they say that the testimony of a woman is unacceptable in the cases of punishments at all. I mean, I've tried to explain this view, which is basically something which Ustaz Ghamidi has already explained in many of his talks and his writings, and of course below this verse as well. But the first thing that he has pointed out is that the cardinal mistake, or the basic mistake which has been made by our jurists, is that they have not realized that the Quran is talking here about documentary evidence in which you can pick and choose your witnesses. And our jurists have made a law regarding circumstantial evidence which is diametrically different, because we don't have the choice to choose our witnesses. So therefore, this particular verse cannot be used as an analogy in any way. And the second thing that he's pointed out is that basically this verse is not addressing a court of law. It's not telling a court of law or a judge that whenever a case comes to you in this way, then you have to pick out witnesses, or you have to call out witnesses in such and such a way. This is basically addressing Muslims in their social structure, in their social capacity. And this verse is telling Muslims that, well, it is better that you write down the loan transaction, and you call in witnesses on your loan transaction so that it does not cause any dispute. And therefore, if you are able to choose your own witnesses, then of course in the situation that Arabia was in that time, was that of course women were not used to such procedures, and therefore they were given this concession, and men were asked to give this concession to them, that instead of dragging them into the court of law, it is better that they just confine this matter to two men. But if that is not the case, then of course an option has been given. So basically it was this social advice that was given, and that too in this specific and peculiar milieu of the Arab culture. And hence this verse can in no way be made a basis to qualify the fact that a testimony of a woman is not acceptable, or as I said in the case of Ibn Hazm, it is half that of a man. As far as crimes are concerned, it is the discretion of the judge that is final. He or she, whoever is sitting on the seat of the judge, is the final say whether he would accept someone or she would accept someone as a witness or not, regardless of gender. He or she can accept the witness of a woman, and it can reject, for example, the witnesses of 10 men if they are not clearly testifying. So the issue of testimony is something which the Quran, except in a few cases, which of course we'll discuss some other time, has left to the discretion of the judge. And therefore, in this matter, no specific procedure has been given. Even a DNA report, even circumstantial evidence which can be relayed through a camera or a CCTV footage, that is also equally acceptable if that evidence is given in a very clear way. The second thing which is mentioned in these verses is that whether that loan is acquired for a short time or a long time. So the Quran says, in that case also, you should not in any way desist from writing it down. So the Quran says that وَلَا تَسْأَمُوا أَن تَكْتُبُوهُ صَغِيرًا أَوْ كَبِيرًا إِلَىٰ أَجَلِهِ, which means, and whether the matter is big or small, be not negligent in documenting the deed up to its period. So even if it is a small amount of money, but it is something to be given for a longer period of time, even then you must write it down, and don't think that because the amount is small, so therefore there is no need to go out and have it written down. And then what is said further is that if the matter is of an everyday transaction, for example, if you're lending or borrowing, or you're buying something or doing it on the spot, and things they get returned on the same day, then the Quran says that in that case, if you don't write it down, it is fined. And it also says that not only in matters of lending, but also in matters of sale purchase, you should also call in witnesses, and you should also have it testified. So it says, وَأَشْهِدُوا إِذَا تَبَايَعْتُمْ وَلَا يُضَارَّ كَاتِبٌ وَلَا شَهِيدٌ. And call in witnesses also if you sell or purchase anything. And this is precisely today in modern times, when we sell something or we purchase anything, we get a receipt. So that receipt is a written proof or a documentary proof. So precisely this is what the Quran had said many centuries ago, that when you are buying something or selling something, not just lending or borrowing, but buying and selling, that also must be documented, because of course that can also become a means of dispute. And the Quran has further warned that if you do not do this, وَإِن تَفْعَلُوا فَإِنَّهُ فُسُوقٌ بِكُمْ. If you start to harm the scribe or the witness, then this is something very bad. Again, this is a social instruction given by the Quran, that when you are trying to harm the witness or the scribe, then you are trying to play with the possibility that if things go wrong, then of course that there would be no means to find out the truth in them. So you must not harm the scribe or the witness in any way. And if you do so, then this is a transgression which will cling to you. And then, viewers, another small part of the issue of interest, or in fact, lending is also a part of it, is also said here, that when you are on a journey and then you have to do such a thing, then what should be done? So now we will study that final verse which relates to this whole issue before we study the last part. So it says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ وَلَمْ تَجِدُوا كَاتِبًا فَرِهَانٌ مَقْبُوضًا فَإِنْ أَمِنَ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا فَلْيُؤَدِّ الَّذِي اؤْتُمِنَ أَمَانَتَهُ وَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ رَبَّهُ وَلَا تَكْتُمُوا الشَّهَادَةَ وَمَنْ يَكْتُمُوهَا فَإِنَّهُ آثِمٌ قَلْبُهُ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ عَلِيمٌ. And if you are on a journey and a scribe is not available to you, a loan can also be taken by placing something in possession of the lender against the loan. Then if a situation of mutual trust arises, then he who has been entrusted with that possession should return it back, and he should remain faithful to God his Lord, and should call in people to bear witness on this matter. And do not conceal evidence in whatever form it is, and remember that whoever conceals it, his heart will become sinful. And remember that God knows whatever you do. So now this situation, dear viewers, is discussed, in which a person is on a journey, and during that journey there is no scribe available, and the issue of lending and borrowing arises. So what should be done? Because you cannot write down that. So the Quran says in that case the person should just take a small possession in his own possession. I mean, small piece of thing that can be in a possession, which is like a guarantee that that lending that he has done will be returned whenever he asks for. But then the Quran says that as soon as circumstances become conducive, that now you can write it down, then whatever thing you had, the borrower had acquired, I mean the lender had given, had acquired from the borrower, it should be given back to the borrower, and because this was just like a security or a guarantee. So once situation arises in which you can have now that whole deal documented, you should have it returned and should not in any way tamper with it. And the Quran has actually called it to be an amana, which means a trust, and says that فَلْيُؤَدِّ الَّذِي اؤْتُمِنَ أَمَانَتَهُ وَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ رَبَّهُ وَلَا تَكْتُمُ الشَّهَادَةَ. He should not hide his witness or his conceal his evidence in any way. And a person who does so, Quran says, his heart will become sinful. فَإِنَّهُ آثِمٌ قَلْبُهُ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ عَلِيمٌ. And remember that God knows whatever you do. So this is that last part of lending, which is described here, that if your scribe is not available because you are on a journey, remember writing down is essential. But if in the absence of a scribe, then what you can do is the person who is lending the money, of course, can accept security from the borrower, which means that, of course, he will have some security, and the loan, he will not run away with the loan. But as soon as matters become conducive that things can be written down, then that possession or that thing of security or that collateral must be returned. So viewers, before we finish off the surah and in the last couple of verses which are coming up, if you have any questions regarding the part that we have just covered, which relates to, of course, not only borrowing and lending on interest, but also to writing down the document of loan and at the same time its justification, you can raise those questions now.
Dr. Saleem, there are no questions at this time, so I'll ask you a question. God in His infinite wisdom, why do you think what is your thought process when two women are called upon? It almost seems like it's half a testimony, even if it's documentary evidence. Why is that? A woman's intellect is as good as a man's. Her memory is as good as
So
a
you see,
man's. So why?
the intellect is not under question here. The intellect is not under question here at all. It's just that a person might get confused because you see, in the times of Arabia, as I said, this is a specific situation of Arabia. You might not find it today existent in most societies. This is a very, very specific, society-specific situation in which, in those times, women, they were not used to these courts of law and going there and testifying. And the somber atmosphere of a court of law or being presented in front of a judge, of course, it is an overawing experience for many, even for men at times. So this was the case with Arab women of those times, that they would not feel comfortable. So basically, this is the discomfort that they might have felt, and as a result might have faltered in their testimony. And therefore, they are given this choice that, well, if they are in any way, they forget their testimony, then the other person or the other woman who's besides her can remind her. So basically, as I said, this does not belong, I mean, this is a directive, or this is a situational directive given, keeping in view the nature of the Arab women or women of Arabia of those times. It has nothing to do with all women, and as I said, it is not even a legal requirement. It is basically a social injunction which is given to people, not to a court of law, in which they can safeguard their matters and not end up fighting with one another. So the choice is yours, and at the same time, if you choose women, it is given, I mean, as your choice, that if you would like to have women, then have them too. But for example, if someone would have liked, I mean, as I said, many other societies in which this is not the case, if someone thinks that women can be equally responsible in testifying, then they can pick solely women for this purpose as well. Because you see, as I said, this is not a legal advice or legal injunction given by the Quran, and at the same time, it does not relate to a court of law, and also it relates to a specific society in which women were vulnerable, which today they are not in many societies.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, Shaba Wasim, you may ask your question. Please unmute your mic.
Sir, my question is regarding ayat number 277. Like a lot of ayah, and it say like you don't have any sadness and this. So what kind of sadness is here normally Allah Ta'ala saying whenever it's end of the ayah?
Where does it say that? وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ?
Yes.
As I've explained this in our previous sessions also, that this actually refers to the life of paradise. The life of paradise is signified with no fear of the past, I mean, no regret of the past and no fear of the future. So you see, our worldly life is punctuated with these two shortcomings. Either we are always regretful of what happened in the past, or we have a fear of that future. I mean, this is something that lives with us as we lead our life in this world. So the Quran has given this expression of the life of paradise at numerous occasions, and it says that when you enter paradise, when you will go there, you will neither have any regret of the past nor any fear of the future. So this expression actually relates to the next world.
But normally most of the ulama which I heard, like they think like this is for this world. If people is doing a pray,
it's not. I mean, I can refer you to the beginning of Surah Baqarah. Maybe I think it's verse 36 or 37. You can look it up. This is the first instance in which this expression occurs. La khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. And if you look up that part of Surah Baqarah, you'll find that it is mentioned adjacent to hell. So it says that people who will be consigned to hell will end up in such and such a way. And then right after that, it says those who will I mean, the others would be the ones who would be la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. So this parallel placement right after hell actually tells us in a very subtle and clear words, I would say, that the life of hereafter in paradise is being discussed here, because right before that, in the opposite type of life was discussed, which is the life of hell. So these are very subtle insinuations of the Quran, which make us which give us this inference. And a practical thing also refers to this. I mean, has any person ever witnessed a life in which there is no regret of the past and no fear of the future? Is it humanly possible? I don't think it's humanly possible. I mean, you will always have regrets of the past. You'll always have fears of the future, because this is our human. I mean, we are humans. We cannot live without these two things. These are our insecurities. So therefore, I think then no person ever has had the pleasure of living a life without regret or fear of the future, in practical times also, in practical situation as well. So practically also this is impossible, and if you look at the scripture also, you'll find basically that it is referring to the life of paradise wherever it says these words.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much, Shaba. So, Dr. Saleem, another question I had was that when we talk about usury, Bible also mentions it. So does the Quran. Does the Torah mention it in its jurisprudence? Because
Does
there's so many banks.
it does?
Does it?
The Torah also mentioned that. I mean, this is something which is proscribed. In fact, it is the Torah which actually proscribes it. Jesus has just referred to the Torah because, as he has said, that he did not come to revoke the law but to complete it. So the Torah does mention that as well.
So why is it historically that even in Roman times, the Jewish people were the ones who were lending money? Do we know? Is there a
Because they
reason for
had
that?
because they had deviated from their own religion. So remember, there are so many things which had happened to their religion. They had wandered away from the message of God. Not only in the case of interest, they had also ended up associating partners with God. And this took place at the times of Moses, when the issue of calf worship actually emerged. And other than that, when they entered Palestine, they also committed adultery, and at the same time they were also guilty of worshipping other idols. So you see, a lot of deviation took place in their life as well. It doesn't matter if their scripture says one thing. I mean, it's not necessary that whatever their scripture says, they are always going to follow it. Look at what Muslims are doing. So scripture is one
Yes.
thing, and following the scripture is another thing.
So basically, it's mentioned in all books.
Yes, and in
usually.
the case of Christianity, because see, today what we are witnessing is Pauline Christianity. So Saint Paul of Tarsus, he had actually revoked the Sharia for all non-Jews. He said that this is just meant for the Jews. So therefore, people who profess faith in Jesus, and they think that, and they have this belief that he has died for our sins on the cross. So as long as they believe in this, that is sufficient for their salvation, and they are not required to follow the Sharia of the Bible. So this is something that he presented, and it became slowly the narrative of whole Christianity. And this Christianity that we are today used to, and what we see today, is not the true Christianity, or not the true picture of what the Bible says. It is basically what Saint Paul actually authored.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. There are no more questions at this time. If you want to continue with the session.
Okay. So now we're going to finish off, inshallah, this Surah Baqarah, the last couple of verses. These are very, very profound verses, and they have a very deep impact. The last part of Surah Baqarah itself is something that if you read it, it shows how it affects your mind, your soul, and your thinking. So it starts off by these words: "Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard, wa in tubdu ma fi anfusikum aw tukhfuhu yuhasibkum bihillah. فَيَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُعَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ." To God belongs all that is in the heavens and the earth. So you too, O Israelites, shall one day be returned to Him. And whatever is in your hearts, whether you reveal it or conceal it, God shall bring you to account for it. Then He shall forgive whomsoever He wants to, according to His law, and punish whomsoever He wants to. And God has power over all things. So remember, this is a surah in which primarily the Israelites have been discussed, the Jews in particular, and their chart sheet was presented to them. So if you recall the structure of Surah Baqarah, the first half of the surah actually outlines the chart sheet against them, how they were guilty of breaking the law of God time and again, and how they were responsible of breaking their covenant with God. And in the next half, we see how the new Ummah, which is the Ishmaelites, they were instituted and they were given new laws, and we just finished the last part of that law, which of course relates to interest. So now this ending of Surah Baqarah is very significant. And as you see that Ustaz has described this in the form of a parenthetical sentence, that once this surah is ending, it is now telling the Israelites that you shall be returned to him. So remember that whatever is in your hearts, whether you reveal it or conceal it, God shall bring you to account for it. So now that you are being deposed of your position, now whatever you have in your heart, whether it's that venom, that jealousy, that the feeling of envy that you had for the Ishmaelites, don't think that it's not going to be called to account and God is not aware of it. So he is going to call you to account. Yuhasibkum bihillah. And then this is a very, very common expression of the Quran, that he will forgive whomsoever he likes. But remember, this whomsoever he likes does not actually qualify anything which based on his whims or desires. It is basically, as other parts of the Quran clearly say, it's based on his law, and that is whoever deserve to be mitigated, whoever deserve to be given concession, they shall be the ones who will be given concession, and others will not be given any concession, and they will be punished. So God is someone who has power of both these things. But this expression, when the Quran says that no one can, he will do whatever he wants. Of course, whatever he'll do will be according to the norms of justice. But this is more in line with the fact that the idolaters of Arabia, they would think that their own deities, their own angels, they regard the angels to be daughters of God, they would be able to win a decision in favor of them, whatever decision they would like. So to them, these verses are addressed, and they say that no one can stop the hand of God. He will do whatever he likes. Of course, whatever he likes would be in accordance with justice, but don't think that these angels and these deities are going to change his stance. He has full power of everything. He'll do so according to justice, and no one is going to affect that. So that is primarily what is being said here whenever the Quran says he would do whatever he likes. So that whatever he likes, basically, of course, will be based on justice, but whatever he likes is actually referring to the fact that his will prevail. These deities, these idols, will not hold any sway on his will and intent. So, amana rasulu bima unzila ilayhi min rabbihi wal mu'minun kullun amana billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusuli la nufarriqu bayna ahadin min rusulihi wa qalu sami'na wa ata'na ghufranaka rabbana wa ilaykal masir. If you do not believe, then it is you alone who will face its consequences. Our messenger has professed faith in what has been revealed to him by his Lord and to his followers. All these professed faith in God and his angels and his books and his messengers. They affirm, we do not discriminate between any of God's messengers. And they have said, we listened and obeyed. Lord, we seek your forgiveness, and know to you shall we return. So the first thing which is mentioned as this closing statement of Surah Baqarah, once it is said that these Israelites should know that they would be taken to account for that, it is stressed that what has actually happened is that this last messenger, he has professed faith in God, and it's not only he who has professed faith, but his followers also have professed faith in God and his angels and his books and his messengers, and this is how they have been lined up. And the bottom line which is then stated is La nufarriqu bayna ahadim min rusuli, that we do not discriminate, we do not differentiate between any of his messengers. So remember, the very cause that led the Israelites away was their notion of being superior, or thinking themselves to be superior because they were followers of Moses, and they think that they still probably do so, that they are superior to other races. So this is dented by this statement that the true attitude in this way is that it's not superiority because you are the follower of one messenger. That's not the case at all. In fact, the balanced statement is what is given by Prophet Muhammad and his followers. And what is that? That is La nufarriqu bayna ahadim min rusuli, that we shall not differentiate. We shall not differentiate between any of God's messengers. And then, of course, it is said that the way that we will go about that is that we listened and we obeyed. Sami'na wa ata'na. This is how God says that you should behave towards him. Wa ilaykal masir. And then La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha laha ma kasabat wa ilayha maktasabat. Rabbana la tu'akhizna in nasina aw akhta'na. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. Says that this is a fact that God shall not burden a person beyond his capacity. It is his law that a person alone shall get what he earned, and he alone shall pay for what he did. Lord, take us not to task if we forget or lapse into error. So this is the prayer. And Lord, do not lay on us a burden as you had laid on those before us. And Lord, do not burden us with what we cannot bear. And pardon us and forgive our sins and have mercy upon us. You are our Lord. So help us against these disbelievers who are confronting us as enemies. So this is that beautiful prayer with which this surah ends ultimately. And keeping in mind the fact that the pitfalls with which the previous ummah was faced, of course, this law, this dua or this supplication is exactly in line with that, because besides telling or requesting the Almighty that God, whatever we do in forgetfulness, or we are not totally in paying heed to such things, then please do not take us to task regarding such forgetfulness. And at the same time, it says that please do not burden us with extra things that we cannot bear. So this is in reference to what the Jews had been confronted with because of their specific attitude towards God. They had started to ask questions against him, and they narrowed down the scope of their Sharia. And at the same time, they were punished for their misdemeanor, and they were given certain extra directives which were very harsh. And the Quran says, "Zalika bibaghihim." This was because of their rebelliousness. So this is a prayer now which being sounded from the tongue of the Prophet and his companions, that God, please do not burden us with what we cannot bear. So when the Quran says, "La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha," that no soul shall be burdened beyond its capacity, of course, it refers to the fact that directive of Sharia which will be given to them will never be those which can actually be beyond their capacity. They shall always be in line with their capacity if they behave according to the precepts given to them. And the last couple of words are so beautiful, and they are so they are so musical as well. And at the same time, they have that ring, which, if a person is aware of the Arabic or the intricacies of the Arabic language, he simply marvels. Wa'fu anna, waghfir lana, warhamna, anta maulana. See, all these four words, they occur one after the other with a very special tune and a very special message. And then it says, "Fansurna al qawmil kafirin," that God, please help us against these disbelievers who are confronting us as our enemies. So with this, we come to an end to Surah Baqarah. Inshallah, next time we'll start off, we'll actually first finish this literal and idiomatic translation of verses 261 to 286. And once we are done with that, then only we'll start off with the next surah, which is Surah Al Imran. So for now, you can ask questions regarding what we have studied in this last section, or if there are no questions specific to our text today, then you can also ask some general questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. It was a wonderful explanation of Surah Baqarah. Thank you so much for guiding us. We have a general question. Abdul Rahman, you may unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, my question is with regards to the test of life. Usually, when we are said that we are in a test, we want to know how right we are. When we write an exam, we want to know how right and correct we are. So most of the time, when people say that we need to please Allah and we need to do things for His pleasure, so I don't understand. Like, it creates a kind of anxiety within ourselves that what I am doing wrong, if a person is a good person, what I'm doing wrong that is not pleasing Allah. So at the end, I want to know how right I am, or I have to please Allah. What's the ultimate purpose of this test?
Actually, you see, you can easily understand if you, by analogy, if you boil it down to the situation that we are faced in this world. So look at your parents. So when we say or we think that we need to please our parents and we must not annoy them, what does it mean? It actually refers to the fact that our parents, they get annoyed when we do certain things which are detrimental to our own selves, in which we would suffer. So you see, the likeness and the pleasure of your father or your mother, when he or she sees you do something, is actually for your own benefit. When you do good things because they're going to benefit you, your father or your mother will be happy that you're doing good things. But vice versa would make them angry, or they'll not. They'll feel as if you're not doing the due that was required of you. So, in a very similar way, pleasing Allah is not something which He needs. He does not require any work from us. Anything that we do, it's not going to supplement what He needs for His personal self. He is self-sufficient. He has everything. When He gets displeased, it is basically because when we are doing something which is wrong, for example, if we tell lies, we are unjust, we reserve the rights of other people, or all sorts of these bad things, then the reflection of that is not going to fall on God in any way, because you're not going to harm or take away anything from God. Basically, it is something that we will suffer ourselves. And this is something just like a parent would feel uneasy that you are harming your own self. You're not watching over your own interest. So in a very similar way, when God sees that we are doing something that is actually ultimately going to make us suffer, He does not like that. So we need to understand that the pleasure of God is basically referring to the fact that when we do things that are going to harm our own interest, then that is what makes God angry, just as it makes our parents angry. So if you are able to understand this detail, you'll understand that pleasing God actually, it comes out as if He is our master and we are trying to, do some task for His benefit. That's not the case. We are doing everything for our own benefit. But because He loves us a lot, He feels happy when we are doing good things.
Sir, just a follow up on this. What if a person intention is to do the right thing? This is the right thing. I suppose a person studies multiple religions. A generic study, not like a scholarly study, and understand that this Islam is the right path.
Right.
So his intention is to follow the right path, not to please Allah. So would that be something sinful kind of thing?
Certainly not, because you see, the basic responsibility which we think we should follow is that we should always be seekers of the truth, critical thinkers. That is what God wants us to do, that we should find out what the truth is, wherever the truth is, and just follow it. How can He be angry with that? This is something of a responsibility, in fact, what we have. And people who are not seeking the truth, they'll in fact end up in a spot of bother in the hereafter, because they became satisfied with the religion or the thoughts of their forefathers, and they just continued without thinking whether they were right or wrong. So we are required to critically evaluate whatever we believe. And if that makes us abandon some of the beliefs of our forefathers, then it is in line with the search for the truth. So basically, it is the search for the truth, the quest for the truth, which is our responsibility. And for that, we can change our prior stance, adopt a new one. And in fact, this attitude should continue till our very last breath.
So just continuing with this question, Dr. Saleem. So, but the basic premise has to be that you have to believe in one God. The right can only be, like what the gentleman asked was, the right is only right if you believe in that one God, right? Not that you just being right, but not believing in God.
You see, this is a premise which the Quran starts off with, because it says that the existence of God, or the fact that you acknowledge God, is not something that you need to know from the Quran. It says that just as the awareness of evil and vice and virtue and good and evil is innately found in us. We know what right and wrong are, don't we? We don't need to go and find out from people whether justice is a right thing or not. So just as the conception of these basic truths is found innately in our intuition, in a very similar way, the Quran says that the conception of God is already found in a person. When he's born with that conception. So that is a given. What happens is that at times the atmosphere or the environment around him or the intellectual questions around him, they might make that conception of God go into oblivion. So therefore, then you can use the Quran and see how the Quran at times cautions and prods you and says that, well, this is something of an a priori. This is something that you must already acknowledge, and it gives you various instances and various indications to say that, remember, you might not remember, but this happened, that before every soul was created, it was called before the Almighty, and it said, Alastu bi Rabbikum, are you not my Lord? And Lord, the Almighty actually asked them, am I not your Lord? Alastu bi Rabbikum. And all the souls of every human being replied, yes, you are. But we don't remember this, of course. That has been made to, we have been made to forget that, because, of course, it's to be a means of trial as well. But we do see that the concept of a God is found within us, because we know from our own structure that we are creatures. We have been created, and there has to be a creator. So the conception of a creator is inbuilt within us. And people who do not believe in a creator, for example, atheists, they are very, very few in number, if you look at the numbers against those who believe in God. And also, let me point this out while we are discussing this, that the reason for this atheistic attitude is seldom why the existence of God could be proved otherwise or not. Its basic reason is the problem of evil, which is existing ever since time immemorial. So atheists are not able to justify the existence of God on the one hand, and the existence of evil at the same time in this world. So they say that if there is evil, then they cannot be God. How can he be merciful and at the same time send earthquakes and floods and kill so many people? So this is something, I know there are other reasons as well, but one of the basic reasons is not denying God. The reason that I've brought up this debate, discussion of atheism, is that even atheists, if you confront them, if you tell them that, or explain religion to them in the right way, and you're able to solve the problem of evil before them, they'll just leap up to accepting God. So even they will not deny it. So the point I'm making is that denying God is so difficult, because we are created with that conception. And people who seem to be denying God are also denying him, because they are not able to explain the existence of evil and his mercy at the same time.
Okay, thank you so much. Shabana Ansari, you may unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
डॉक्टर साहब, ये जो आखिरी आयत है इसमें जो है ला नुफरिकु बैना अहदिम मिन रुसुली, तो उसमें लगता है जैसे अल्लाह ताला एम्फसाइज कर रहे हैं इसी चीज पे कि सारे अंबिया जो हैं वो रसूल और अंबिया जो हैं वो अल्लाह ताला के हैं। तो आमतौर पे उम्मतों में ये हो जाता है कि वो अपने अपने नबी को लेके जो है वो ज्यादा वो हो जाती हैं और वो उनको बड़ा साबित करने लगती हैं। जैसे यहूद ने शुरू में हजरत मूसा को तो बहुत उन्होंने तंग किया, हजरत ईसा को उन्होंने माना ही नहीं, और नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को तो तकब्बुर पर उन्होंने बिल्कुल ही रिजेक्ट कर दिया। लेकिन आज जैसे उम्मत मुस्लिमा जो है वो भी ऐसी है कि वो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को सारे अंबिया के ऊपर कहते हैं कि वो सबसे बड़े नबी थे। हालांकि वो आखिरी नबी थे, लेकिन जाहिर है कि सारे नबी जो है उनको हम फॉलो कर सकते हैं, लेकिन वो कहते हैं नहीं जी आखिरी नबी है, बस उन्हीं को फॉलो करना है। और किसी के, जबकि कुरान में भी अल्लाह ताला कहता है कि सबकी सीरत को जो है फॉलो करना है हमने। तो ये क्या बीमारी उम्मतों में हो जाती है कि वो अपने नबी को बढ़ा चढ़ा के पेश?
बिल्कुल हो जाती है। आप देखें कि वो बीमारी इतनी ज्यादा बड़ी है हमारे मसीही बरादरी के अंदर, कि उन्होंने मसीह को खुदा का बेटा बना लिया, और खुदा का बेटे होने के नाते उन्होंने कहा कि इनसे बड़ा तो कोई हो नहीं सकता, कि वो खुद खुदा हैं। उन्होंने उनको सुपीरियर समझ लिया। यही मामला जो है वो यहूदियों का हुआ, उन्होंने अपने पैगंबर को सुपीरियर समझ लिया। और अगर आप तारीख पढ़ेंगी तो हमारे सामने तो चूंकि यहूद नसारा की तारीख बहुत रोशन तरीके से मौजूद है, तो उसमें ये जगह जगह बरतरी के दावे मौजूद हैं, और उसके नतीजे में तफरीका पैदा हुआ है, लोग एक दूसरे से खिंचे हैं और दूर हुए हैं। ये तो हमारी उम्मतों की तारीख रही है। इससे पहले भी अगर आप चले जाएंगे, अगर हमें कुछ तारीख मिल जाएगी तो यकीनन आप उसमें भी देखेंगे कि ये जो है ना, इसको कुरान से कहते हैं गुलू। गुलू का मतलब है किसी चीज में एग्जैजरेशन पैदा करना, किसी चीज को जरूरत से ज्यादा आगे बढ़ा देना। तो और कुरान ने बाकायदा कहा ला तगलू फी दीनिकुम, कि अपने दीन के अंदर गुलू पैदा ना करो, जो बात जितनी है वहां रखो। लेकिन ये उम्मत हमारी यहाँ, ये सामी नस्लें हैं, अगर आप तारीख पढ़ें, सामी वो हैं कि जो सेमाइटिक रेसेस हैं, उनके यहाँ अगर आप हिस्ट्री में देखेंगे तो हीरो वर्शिप का जो है ना टेंडेंसी वो बहुत ज्यादा है। यानी वो अपने यहाँ लोगों को हीरो बनाते हैं और वो फिर सुपर हीरोज बन जाते हैं। वो जो सुपर हीरोज हैं वो सुपर ह्यूमन बन जाते हैं, वो इंसान नहीं रहते और वो इंसान से बढ़ के खुदाई सिफात के हामिल हो जाते हैं। तो ये एक ऐसी बीमारी ही कह लें जो सामी नस्लों में बहुत ज्यादा पाई जाती है, वो हीरो वर्शिप। और ये हीरो वर्शिप है जो इंसान को फिर इंसान के तौर पे रहने नहीं देती और हीरोज को एलिवेट कर देती है खुदाई लेवल।
जैसे हमारे यहाँ भी नातों में जो है वो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को खुदा से भी आगे कर दिया जाता है।
जी ऐसे ही है।
जी
थैंक यू सो मच शबाना। नौशाबा वसीम, यू मे आस्क योर क्वेश्चन।
सर मेरा क्वेश्चन लास्ट तो आयत से, जिस तरह कुछ जगहों पे पढ़ने में आता है कि अगर आप रात को ये 2 आयतें पढ़ लो तो आप पूरी रात शैतान की प्रोटेक्शन में चले जाओगे, और इसी तरह सूरत कैफ का भी होता है कि 1 हफ्ते पे दूसरे जाल के। तो सर इनकी हकीकत क्या है, इसका कोई बैकग्राउंड?
अक्सर और बेशतर रवायात बिल्कुल ज़ईफ हैं, खड़ी हुई हैं और इनकी कोई हकीकत नहीं है, इनकी कोई ऑथेंटिसिटी नहीं है।
Okay. Okay. Dr. Saleem, we have no more questions at this time. If you want to end the session,
So inshallah, we will end this session right now. And as I said, inshallah, next time we'll be finishing off Surah Baqarah by completing its literal and idiomatic translation. And then inshallah, start off with the next surah, which is Surah Al Imran.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. It was a wonderful session. Thank you so much, audience. Appreciate you all.